When I reviewed Lupin's 1970 live-actions movie back in 2017, I didn't think I'd end up taking a trip through all the Lupin specials that try to do an origin story for the character. Especially since I feel the character does not need an origin story. I'm not doing the pilot film, cause just, no. And I especially didn't think I'd end up doing this simply to talk about a guy that I have condemned several times, as this special was written by a man I have criticized heavily before, Shoji Yonemura. Now, for those new to my reviews and haven't seen the old stuff, Shoji Yonemura I consider a bad writer of original content. He was infamously the primary writer of Toei's superhero Tyson Spring movie line, a series of crossovers between their live-action tokusatsu works, and ones that are so reviled that Toei eventually canceled them long after the damage to the properties involved had been done, and rendered a lot of them officially non-canon. At least until the producer brought them back because he doesn't know how to leave well enough alone and ignored how hated they were. And in my reviews, I kept pointing out the exact same flaw with them. Yonemura knew jack all about any characters he himself did not create, so was among the worst writers they could have put on them. He did a lot wrong to the characters involved in those events, to the point the long-lasting character assassination and damaged reputation ruined their public appeal. And in the real world, made it far more difficult to sell any merchandise based off of them. Yeah, I'm not making that up. If you're looking for the reason why Bandai massively reduced the amount of merchandise they made based off of the Showa-era Kamen Riders, well, the Tyson movie's mischaracterization of them was one of the factors that made it so Bandai literally could not sell things featuring them, as their core sales demographics, and also the periphery ones, thought so badly of them after said movie's misrepresentation of who they were, which in all the reviews I did of them, I pointed out. And this isn't me talking about this. A article writer for the Tokusatsu Network actually correlated the data and saw the sales decline for their merch. However, it has become more evident that the primary problem of those movies and who was responsible for their offensive nature was, in fact, the demands of their producer, Shinichiro Shirakura, who not only hates those heroes, but is named infamous for being overly controlling and promoting the absolute worst versions of, well, anything, with how productions under him become twisted to his perspective, and all to their detriment with how badly they turn out with their haphazard plot-hole-ridden make, especially with how he prefers to use writers as his mouthpieces, who end up writing their worst under him. And I have miscredited a fair portion of the blame previously, simply from lack of information. Yonemura fell into his orbit when he was brought on to assist Toshiki Inoue in the post-staff change tenure of 2005's Kamen Rider Hibiki. While I was not able to release a review on that series due to Toei's content ID abuse and death threats I've received making me discontinue reviews on that franchise and Toei's productions in general, I say without hyperbole that episode 31 through 48 of Hibiki are unwatchably bad because of Shirakura's mandates that contradicted everything the show had been doing before, as was revealed when the behind-the-scenes strife was later made public by the show's cast members that Shirakura was the single-handed, sole reason why the show was ruined. But the devolution of Yonemura's writing only hit full force when Shirakura later brought him on as the replacement writer of 2009's Kamen Rider Decade in its final third, after the show's original writer could no longer deal with Shirakura's nonsense and quit, and Yonemura helped to screw over that show as well. Yonemura's capabilities and reputation ultimately became a casualty of all of that. His best-received original work was 2006's Kamen Rider Kabuto, which he co-wrote with Toshiki Inoue, and was overseen by producers Naomi Takebe and Atsushi Kaji, though Shirakura is often miscredited as being on that one, when even he says he was not involved with it. And contrary to what you might think, I actually agree with those who say Kabuto is good, as all of Yonemura's problems, they are avoided so his idiosyncrasies actually work in Kabuto, as Yonemura and Inoue took the time to flesh out the cast and iron out the details to make his common tropes feel justified. As Kabuto does possess most of his trademarks, Yonemura specializes in glorification of one character as an icon above all others, and tends to write cast members in very stock, cyclical, and repetitious roles, where their antagonism isn't so much facilitated through character differences, but story points. Worse, as a series goes on, it collects plot points that are not properly explored, so people think they're never resolved even when they are, making the story become convoluted from the audience perspective as it poorly explained itself even if all the important details would be there, Sometimes, if they're not revised enough, they just aren't and left on the cutting room floor. And most prominently, Yonemura can only write curb stomp battles. It is always choreographed who will win as the one who eventually takes the victory, never is shown losing control of the flow of a given fight. Thus its ending is quite plainly telegraphed. However, despite these issues, and trust me, there are works of Yonemura's where each of these issues are exacerbated to the extreme, the characters within Kabuto with their quirks actually help sell all that happened because it made clear that they are all very flawed individuals who make mistakes throughout their story, and with rare exception have it acknowledged that they do make mistakes, and we are given insight to their abilities to validate the actions they make as characters. And many of the fights among heroes, which I have grown to despise in these works as they're rarely justified, are thus framed as conflicts between disparate perspectives and values, thus explaining why an issue may appear to be dropped unless they choose to bring up an element of a dispute again. Thus, unlike the Tyson films, which assassinate the characters to make someone right even when they shouldn't be, all for a message that makes everyone look bad as a result, as they're fighting each other even though they then share the same values, with Kabuto, everything fits a grander perspective and positive message by its end that does properly represent the franchise's ideology. I honestly wish I would have been able to actually release the review of Kabuto that I wrote, so I could showcase how at that point in his career, Yonemura was capable of overcoming his failings as long as he had the right guiding hands with him. And also to the many merits of its protagonist, Soji Tendo, that the fandom just writes off as being an asshole even though his skills, abilities, viewpoints, and actions are all narratively justified and explored, contrasting him against the other cast members, and especially the character Arata Kagami, whose long-term character arc is centrally built around Kagami's inability to think for himself, while assuming that the actions he takes are always in the right, even though it's showcased that they are not. He was deliberately written that way to show not just how myopic that is, but also to condemn those who get people killed due to that mindset, which has been a problem with several Toei series protagonists, not limited to Shinji Kido and Sogo Tokiwa among them. What people really don't get about the Tendo vs. Kagami mess is Tendo starts the series in a post-character development state. He already went through the training to be the show's big damn hero off-screen. Thus him not changing over the series was deliberate. There's nothing major that needed to change, and most of the arrogance he shows is just him screwing with people or acting as a tsundere. Whereas Kagami is a character that refuses to develop despite needing to, thus keeps making the same mistakes and rarely actually corrects them, and is being used as an example of why that is so bad. But as I said with Yonemura poorly exploring his plots, few audience members got that, and that spiraled into worse things later. Hell, the largest thing people complain about with dropped plot lines in Kabuto is the failure to explain the Red Shoes system, not understanding that the term Red Shoe was a metaphor for the system and not actually its name. And they do explain its origins, and that explanation comes in the final episodes if you were paying attention. I legitimately found fewer plot holes and contradictions in Kabuto than Yonemura's other works, as they cycled back in and out of focus. Again, had I been able to do my review of the show, I would have worked to correct the misconceptions, but Toei's loss on that. Especially since, the people that made the show, I generally don't like. Regardless, after Kabuto, Yonemura's career for making original content basically went to crap, and he no longer had people that would help mediate his faults to grow past them, and thus he became trapped in a rut. Though he still does well in adapting anime from manga, most of the time. But as an example of how trash Yonemura's reputation is, while Fairy Tail Dragon Cry is credited as an original story by him, the reality is Fairy Tail's creator, Hiro Mashima, oversaw every step of the writing process of it so it wouldn't be screwed up, as there was just that much of an expectation that Yonemura would. Beyond that, it's just Pokemon. Yonemura has been writing episodes for the anime since its early years. An example of that, does anyone remember the GS Ball subplot? Yeah, he was responsible for how that subplot's disastrous ending went when the Celebi storyline that Ball was setting up was instead made into Pokemon's fourth movie. He also tried to clean up the mess that was Pokemon XY's ending, with Greninja's farewell to defend Kalos with Zygarde, and mostly succeeded at that. Yes, people were so mad with Ash losing the Kalos League, Yonemura did successful damage control over it. A lot of his Pokemon writing credits are surprisingly watchable, in part because of the loose continuity much of the Pokemon anime operates under. What else has he done? He wrote Precure Smile, which was adapted by Saban into Glitter Force, and it's considered among the worst Precure series. He wrote on Digimon Cross Wars, and his episodes are cited as what sabotaged it and helped to make it among the worst Digimon series. He wrote on Yu-Gi-Oh! Vrains, and alongside a few others, was involved in the episodes that broke the series irreparably, and led to it being cancelled by making everyone hate its characters or hate how they were treated. Sadly, his and the other bad writers' role on Vrains is lost in translation due to the Yu-Gi-Oh! Fandom's obsession with scapegoating longtime series writer Shin Yoshida for anything that goes wrong instead of looking into who actually wrote the episodes they hated. Especially since Shin Yoshida was busy writing a manga during the development and production of Vrains. Now, why this big spiel about the history of a guy whose writing I dislike if I'm going to bash more of his work? Well, here's the thing. Unless the person being criticized is glorifying actions and ideologies that cause actual harm to people, this is not meant to be personal. I criticize and condemn people for the things they do and are responsible for, but not who they are. Researching all these works and then building a history and track record better showcases what went wrong and why, to then judge them accordingly. And inconsistencies in their precedent then require you to look into why that is. And I just keep coming back to the same linchpin of him going to work for Toei, and under specifically Shirakura, being where it went astray. As First Contact? Yeah, this is a good Lupin special. And according to several reviewers who have gone over the various Lupin TV specials over the years, it was the best one made at the time of its release, and was considered for a long time the best one of the entire 2000s. And this one was specifically released in 2002, before Yonemura worked at Toei under Shirakura. Back then, his original scripts just involved Pokemon episodes, and assisting on the Lupin special The Pursuit of Harimao's Treasure in 1995. With his first original main writing credit being Memories of the Walter P-38, which is also known as Island of Assassins, in 1997. And I actually really enjoy both of those Lupin specials. Yeah, my Blu-ray for Island of Assassins is still on order. This is actually the older Funimation DVDs I found at a half-price books years ago. Hell, once more to explore this contradiction in quality from the guy, Island of Assassins is considered the best of the 1990s TV specials, and in the 2000s commonly rated under First Contact as among the best of them. I rewatched all these specials recently, and it's still damn good. The only thing that's bad about them, though, was, well, how the guy handled the matter of Nazis in the Harimau special, which also does seem to be a root problem with a lot of Yonemura's later works that involve villains that are historically Nazi-originating, or Nazi allegory. He does not understand what the Nazis were, and how bad it is to show a heroic character ally or enable them in any way, shape, or form. Something I'm not surprised by, considering Japan's admitted to whitewashing that part of their history, and Toei doing that especially. But all this is why I decided to do this special to wrap up all the Lupin origin stories, since I can't do a proper review of Kabuto in a way that would get it past Toei's abuse of Content ID, as there was legitimately a time when the majority output from Yonemura was good or had understandable reasons for being bad, and he is an example of how badly Toei's bullshit can ruin people's careers. And I wanted to spotlight that in order to put my seeming grudge with the guy to rest. Even though, most people who watch me on YouTube would have no idea of that grudge. What can I say? It's important to own up to this stuff. We open on Daisuke Jigen for once, who's being accosted by a reporter, and it is as you'd expect for a film event about the Lupin gang's first meeting. The reporter is trying to get the inside story of how Lupin's merry band of thieves first met each other, and she thinks that's going to be her big score. This also immediately addressed any kind of inconsistencies that might be featured by the cast, as a sign that way back in the day, Yonemura was self-conscious of how he could often write characters that weren't his, well, out of character. With this being framed as Jigen's reflection upon the event, and thus any contradictions can just be written off as having an unreliable narrator. Sadly, the film pads itself out in getting to the flashback, showing one of the major flaws of the film. That it's pretty padded to hell with scenes that don't really do anything for it beyond try and fill empty air with some sense of atmosphere. Regardless, we flash back to a rich man's party, with Lupin in one of his elaborate disguises. This one having him masquerading as a woman. Oh yeah, that being another thing Yonemura's Lupin specials did a lot of. I've gone over at length how cross-dressing is not comedy, despite how much awful Japanese entertainment tries to assert that it is. But another companion one I've never said much on is the mere existence of trans individuals should also not be a source of comedy. And unfortunately, for a time, it was. Thankfully, the offensive nature of that one has been called out, and its appearances have been on the decline for many years. And even trans comedians in their circuit have gone around to calling it out themselves. Whether Yonemura himself is phobic against those groups, I have no idea, but he's not had a great track record with regards to how he represents them in his works when they've popped up. Again, the transvestite Nazi in the Pursuit of Harima's Treasure being evidence to that, despite LGBT individuals being among the first groups the Nazis burned alive, which just makes that entire thing all the more offensive. To the point Discotheque, when they re-released that film on Blu-ray, had to put a content warning up in regards to it. Once more, points to Discotheque in being awesome people. And, well, this special is still good in spite of that awful element of it, but yeah, if you ever go out to find this, just fair warning. Here, though, well, as I've said before, Arsene Lupin III is an individual who already thinks everything in the world is his. And him playing the disguise gambit is old hat, so it's not that out of line for him to go this far just to steal something. More recent Lupin content than this, however, have been better on this issue overall. But back on point, Jigen's working security for this event and has no hesitance in shooting at Lupin, this being a red jacket incarnation Lupin at that, who quickly pins Lupin to a wall with how Jigen is not one to fall for Lupin's shenanigans, single-handedly forcing him to retreat, and a merry chase is then had by all as the opening credits roll, with it showing the events once more centering themselves in New York, like a number of the specials end up doing. Seriously, New York ends up being a bit overused as a Lupin set piece. My roommates and I ran through every special that's been imported last year, and I swear we were there at least 7 times in those. Regardless, Lupin loses his pursuers, learning from an informant what's up with Jigen, him being the greatest hitman and bodyguard of the underworld. It a loose affiliation to the clients he takes, and his current client, Galvez, owning the artifact that has Lupin's attention at the moment, referred to as the Clam of Hermes. It is a message scroll made from an unidentified metal alloy that is said to contain within the scroll the means by which to make the metal encasing it. The case has baffled analysts, and they can't get it open to discover the secret to the formula, making it a mystery that is just an inescapable draw for a master thief like Lupin. What? Every truly talented professional likes a challenge. But it turns out Lupin's informant, a local man named Brad, is also after the artifact, though he's just being used by still hiding herself, Fujiko Mine. But Lupin's not the only one with a direct foil here. Galvez has other agents that don't take well Jigen's detached professionalism. In specific, a man called Shade, because he's always wearing sunglasses and is dressed like a discount store blade. Ugh. You know, we were still trying to get rid of the 90s with how the man is wearing at least 5 belts. Any more and he'd qualify for a Tetsuya Nomura design. Regardless, Shade hates Jigen and is barking loudly for attention, which Jigen just ignores, going out into the city on his own to track Lupin, still trying to figure out how he dodged his shots. He's ambushed by a bunch of morons trying to get a name, who are then scalped for it. Galvez's other agents try a raid on Lupin's hotel, only to fall into a trap set for them, where it's revealed that the clam had already been stolen, and he's been framed as responsible, Lupin thinking Brad had to be behind that. Okay, how the fuck did he set that up? Like, Yes, as I've said with Lupin before, you've just got to accept some flexible reality, as the franchise has a heavy element of comedy to it which balances the varying focuses and dynamics. Some comedic exaggeration I've not got a problem with, but how did he rig an apartment he was very clearly renting to have a forced ejection system like that? Disguises that are 100% perfect I can accept. Lupin jumping out of his clothes and most types of restraint at the drop of a hat I can accept, as I also can the earlier bits of him escaping pursuit by driving into the subway. The insane feats of skill from Jigen and Goemon are no problem. The fact that Zenigata still has a career after decades of chasing just one man, yeah, those are all fine to me. But rigging an entire apartment like that's where I have a bit more skepticism. Once more, regardless, Shade and his goons end up chasing Lupin right in Jigen's path once again, who's been lying in wait just for this opportunity. But Lupin's luck stat causes Jigen to once more fail to kill him, only getting a hubcap for his trouble. Lupin thus makes it to Brad's place, only to find it ransacked. Damn, Fujiko went to town already. He finds Brad, who dies in his arms, leading Lupin to chase down the biker woman who he saw with Brad earlier as the likely suspect, who is, yes, confirmed to be Fujiko. I mean, who else would they draw with that physical profile that would hang out with thieves so openly? Then again, the varying Lupin series films and specials all tend to draw how curvaceous she is inconsistently, though at least her changes in hair are easily enough explained by her dyeing it to suit her needs. I still prefer how their meeting was handled in The Woman Called Fujiko Mine. It better defined their dynamic. Then again, these two storylines aren't exactly in conflict with each other, and how they interact implies that they have met before. Considering the very flexible continuity of the Lupin franchise, who says they couldn't both be true at the same time? And yeah, she has the scroll case in her apartment, but was unaware Brad had been attacked, meaning she likely swiped it when he wasn't looking or was holding it for safekeeping, until she got a chance to disappear. She of course denies killing him, and she kind of liked the guy. And the fact she hadn't left yet and was in no hurry to shows she likely wasn't involved. Still, this Fujiko comes off a bit more of a sociopath than a selfish seductress, trying to egg Lupin into trying to kill her, which of course as a gentleman thief, he can't. It's a difference in their dynamic I'm not fond of. Again, in the Fujiko series, I feel they handled this better by them both being in the moment of attempting to one-up each other. But in their long-existing game of cat and also cat, I can at least understand there being a point early in their meetings where things might have gone this way between them before it became more playful. Regardless, the case is worthless without the key, so he just hands it back to her until he can claim it as it'll be safe with her. Which leads us to the introduction of...
警視庁より国外逃亡犯峰不二子の捜査を任ぜられました銭形警部です。
Holy crap! A timeline where Zenigata isn't considered a washout and actually gets the respect he deserves as the only cop on the planet that can keep up with Lupin? What madness is this? Wait, sorry, this is just a dream of his. Now the world makes sense again. But yeah, as a twist to the dynamic, Zenigata isn't actually after Lupin. Yet. But Fujiko, who is the larger name in the thief world despite the lower profile she prefers to keep. But again, to this special's credit, First Contact sells Zenigata as a legit badass, not being in the city for more than a half hour before busting the crime that is literally on the streets. Unfortunately for Zenigata, it's shown that members of that little transaction were undercover cops, and Zenigata busted their ability to infiltrate deeper. But honestly, how is that his fault? Just when he got to the city, he saw crime that was too dumb to live by operating in the daytime. What was he supposed to do? Not arrest the people involved? Moreover, undercover agents get arrested in random busts all the time that are come across by officers not informed of the operation. So, how is this suddenly all on him? If anything, it improves those agents' cover by that fake identity having a criminal record. What this special is trying to do, though, I get, in that it's balancing the two sides of Zenigata's character, the myopic goofball and the serious, unyielding cop. Much of Zenigata's comedy in the better specials comes from his unwavering sense of duty, that he feels an obligation to arrest criminals, no matter what, to build a better society, and focuses his time and attention on the worst of them that keep escaping the law. The downside of this is, because he spends so much time focused on Lupin's gang as the apex predators of the underworld, even if they are primarily thieves and not, say, genocidal madmen or behind criminal conspiracies, is because he is the foil for the best of the best, and thus he should only come off as a fool in comparison to them. A lot of Lupin media does this with the guy. It's rare, then, that he gets his chances to be shown as the hyper-competent officer he actually is. As that's the thing a lot of the material, especially the ones that are trying to rip off the Lupin franchise, don't get. He is good at his job. He just isn't good enough to actually manage to capture Lupin, even if he can keep up with him. But that's again why Zenigata can on occasion team up with Lupin and company, because there are and will be more active antagonistic threats, and it's against his own sense of justice to just leave them be just to catch a thief. Lupin the First, the movie, was actually very good at showcasing that. And that's what we were just seeing in action. He has no problem with dealing with common crooks. He's a good officer, unyielding to any form of corruption, and refuses to compromise his ethics. Whereas now that he's in America, there's all the red tape keeping any action from being taken, and them shafting Zenigata from actually being able to do his job.
Oh no, you're a villain!
Again, this was known and lampooned about our criminal justice system in 2002, and being done correctly and successfully at that by a guy that's not a great writer.
本部長に立てついても無駄だ。あんたはジョージ・マクフライ、あんたの助手をいつ買った。
But he looks nothing like Crispin Glover. Fujiko is then attacked on the road by more of Galvaz's goons, brought in alive so as to return the case, only for it to be revealed that this was a feint on Lupin's part to draw Galvaz's attention away from him getting the actual case out of the city. She sweet-talks her way out of a bullet to the face by offering to help track the real Lupin, so once he finds the key to the case, the treasure inside will be all theirs.
お前にその手引きができるというのか?
ルパンのハートを盗めるのは私だけよ。
Again, a sign they have met before. Sure enough, Fujiko's sex appeal is Lupin's one mortal weakness, though how she found him in the middle of nowhere is a very good question.
なんでかな? ずっと前から知ってたような気がする。
不思議ね。私もよ。
Tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme, cat and... also cat. She uses this to plant a GPS tracker on him and then reject his advances. Well, for Zenigata... oh yes, we have the origins of a meme right here.
ハンバーガー？
だからそのハンバーガーをくれと言ってるんだよ。
ハンバーガーって何？
バーガーだ。
Oh, yes!
I can't help myself, I laugh at that every time. Anyways, Lupin shows off where the key is likely hidden, in the hands of a man named Hans Dollarhide, who runs a smuggling operation, whom they infiltrate with little issue. After a very long montage of the characters doing little of relevance. Like I said, this film is very padded. But all that comes of the extended scene is Lupin confirming that Fujiko is part of the planned double-cross, which leaves him an edge up in the game going forward. Still, when the infiltration begins, Lupin causes his usual brand of distracting chaos that lets him inside, even as the New York police actually try and cover up how big a mess Lupin's been making instead of, you know, trying to catch and prosecute him.
わかるのか? このルパン三世ってやつのこと。
It just feels so wrong to hear Zenigata say that. Still, Jigen feels like there's something off about this whole operation, only to find Lupin in the back of his car. Damn it, Jigen, never ignore rule number 31. This is why you have no chance the next time your group gets stuck in a horror movie plot. Lupin says it's a shame Jigen's wasting his skills on the Mafia. And unfortunately, Jigen knows that.
何が言いてえ? まあ、結局のところ、俺たちは似た者同士なんだよ。
They seriously used that line? Really? Really? Jigen's not buying it, for now at least. Lupin being chased off, as Jigen checks in on Fujiko, who tempts him with a better offer. It goes nowhere, all while the police attempt to keep Lupin's raid under wraps, which fails miserably as Lupin as always sends his advance notice everywhere, which makes the police commissioner that spent the film screwing Zenigata over look like an idiot. And he is. Every step of the way, Zenigata has known the right thing to do, only to be told no by this jackass, and thus, he has it coming. Sure enough, Lupin's using this fool to infiltrate under the cover of one of the reporters asking for an interview, knocking him out, and then taking his face off with the help of his advanced makeup skills. Zenigata uncovering how they plan to escape, and uses that method to enter. However, the commissioner not biting Zenigata's head off tips him off immediately to said commissioner being a fake. So when Lupin's scheme shuts down the power to get Dollarhide to open his vault and confirm whether the key is actually there or not, Zenigata is the only one that catches on to Lupin's gambit. Again, while a lot of the specials like to depict Zenigata as a dumbass, this one gets it right. He is the only one here that realizes what Lupin is doing, and from the smallest of clues to it, well, everyone else is baffled. It often seems like Zenigata is not smart, because he is dealing with one of the smartest fictional characters in existence. So, anyone that lifts from Lupin material that doesn't get this, and depicts their Zenigata XP as a meat-headed moron, is majorly fucking up. It's only due to Lupin's quick thinking does he turn the tables on Zenigata by tricking everyone else but him, managing to escape with the key, until his disguise leads him right back into Zenigata's hands as he once more figures out his entire feint. So close, dude. Seriously, I love this special, did right by Zenigata, while still managing to play up the comedy angle. So much of the media doesn't manage to swing that right. Before he can escape the city, though, the Mafia manages to catch up to him. But Lupin reveals he knew about the tracker, and it's revealed where they caught him, it was also trapped against the exact thing. Lupin managing to flee out to the harbor on a boat, followed once more by Jigen, who manages to blow up his boat with a well-placed shot, leaving them at Ellis Island, where a flashback used in the dark cripples Jigen, and leaving open Fujiko to steal the treasure, as always. However, she is chased down by Shade before she can leave town as well, showing once more that as smart as she thinks she is still more predictable than Lupin is. Unfortunately for Jigen, him firing back on Shade during the entire chase was the step too far, and he's imprisoned with Lupin in Galvez's dungeon. Who even has those in this day and age? And of course, he had to ridicule Lupin for trusting in Fujiko. That's actually true. There's an entire Lupin special where Jigen can't shoot straight because he has a rotten tooth that leaves him in too much pain to aim correctly, and he keeps failing to get an appointment to get the tooth removed. Of course, since no guards were set to, well, guard them, Lupin can wriggle his way out easily, as there's no cage yet made that can keep him trapped. Thus, since Galvez has no idea where the Clan of Hermes is, he's able to talk his way out of their collective summary execution. And even manages to gain Jigen's loyalty here, because Galvez is an idiot and tries to pull a double cross on his best man. I would ask how, but Lupin. And unlike the thing with the apartment before, I do believe he'd be able to trap his own gun like that. Incidentally, scenes like this are why there is such an open debate on who played the better English language Lupin between Sonny Strait and Tony Oliver. As while Tony better commands the suave atmosphere of Lupin's Phantom Thief, Sonny you more expect to play the lovable underhanded trickster that's always thinking on how to escape the crises he's in. Though since Sonny also plays Krillin and Usopp, one could say he's more allowed to utilize that persona in those roles there, while Tony's taken over primary duties for Lupin with regards to everything else major. Not that it's like either of them, but you can at least get that both performers buy into different specific aspects of their common role better than the other does. And then suddenly, Goemon is here? What?
貴様らの持つ幻のお宝、それがしがもらい受ける。
Yeah, the case actually contains his Zantetsu Ken, this being another incident where Goemon's sword was stolen from him, as is surprisingly common in these specials, and him freeing Lupin, Goemon, and Fujiko by complete accident in his own bid to escape. So, here's the question. How do you know where his sword was? They just stole it from Dollarhide. There's no way they would have known it was here. Regardless, this quartet's chaos ends up setting the entire place ablaze, Lupin coming to Jigen's rescue when he's cornered once again, and they escape together. Lupin tries to talk Jigen into partnering up again, and while he's more amicable now that he's out of work, well, Jigen is stubborn. It's only when he talks about one of his life goals, ripping off the Federal Reserve, does Lupin start to talk Jigen's language. Still, getting the case open takes priority, Lupin thinking Goemon could do it for them, though it's revealed that Goemon's after the case as well and wants to duel them for the rights to it.
この一刀のもとに切れぬものなし。
Still, Zenigata gets an idea of what they're going to be doing through shenanigans, only for the Commissioner to lock him up in advance of him being deported. Because clearly Zenigata is too good at his job to be anywhere near this corrupt sycophant. Though George, who'd been with him this entire time, deciding to make like a tree and get out of here. If you thought I was making it through this review without making a Back to the Future reference like that, y'all are crazy. Regardless, the duel goes as you'd expect, with it being a gun-sword duel that, as always with the two's confrontations, ends in a draw. Lupin interceding at this point and leading Goemon on a merry chase to see his capabilities with the blade. And this fight reminds me of something. I mean, it's not ripping something off if you yourself wrote it to begin with. As they fight and flee, Goemon confirms that the scroll case is a means by which to create the same steel as the Zantetsu Ken bears. But this is where we get to one of the largest problems of First Contact as a special. And that is, it is ripping off a lot of the other previous Lupin specials. This entire plot point about the scroll case's metal being the same as the Zantetsu Ken's, yeah, that was the entire storyline of the special Dragon of Doom. Them being in New York for a heist? Too many to name. Jigen starting out in the Mafia before Lupin managed to sway him? Again, that's a backstory explored in other media. Even Zenigata's storyline has been done before, in movies and specials made before this in the preceding decade. Which once more spotlights my central problem about Yonemura as a writer. He doesn't have many original ideas, merely remixing the same material others already did better. And it actually took him writing the same movie 6 consecutive years in a row for most people to actually catch on to that. The only defense this movie has that allows it to more get away with it that much of Yonemura's later derivative works do not have is, once again, the framing device of this all being a flashback told by Jigen. Jigen could be an unreliable narrator about all of this, and mixing up the events that happened here with any of the other zaniness that he's intersected with because of these people, especially due to him relating several of the events of it from the perspectives of other characters. Because...
How did you know about the parts you weren't there for?
But while that is an internal out for this story, that doesn't make these decisions to ape others' creative works a good decision, nor reflect well on Yonemura, even back before working for Toei caused him to give into his worst impulses. His ability to echo well others' works? That makes him good for adapting others' works into differing mediums, as it's clear he can see what is important. But in regards to writing an original story that respects characters, their portrayal, and core story, that is a lot more suspect. Regardless, Lupin eventually tricks Goemon into cutting the case open, obtaining the scroll. At the same time, Galvez's men once more catch up to them, leading to yet another fight scene that at this point is just reusing animation from previous parts of the film. The scroll is sent flying and once more taken by Fujiko to show how much the film was looping itself in its padding by this point to meet its runtime. Zenigata ultimately cornering Fujiko, and it being up to Lupin to come to her rescue, and once more be double-crossed. As it turns out, Shade either was in on this the entire time, or Fujiko charmed him. Either way, she was unaware to Shade being Brad's killer, due to the grade of gun he uses that has insane penetrating power that shredded his silver dollar pendant that stops smaller caliber bullets. Shade outright admits it as he got in the way, leading to Fujiko shooting him in turn. Sadly, Shade is strapped with grenades, for some reason I don't understand, meaning neither of them retrieves the scroll and its contents in the end. Resulting in this ending like many of the Lupin specials end, a criminal organization toppled, all at the cost of a priceless relic of the ancient world. Oh, and because Zenigata's now got a hate-on for Lupin constantly avoiding him, this is where Zenigata signs up for Interpol, in order to chase him round the world. That ends Jigen's story, with him ultimately choosing to team up with Lupin more regularly, and it being revealed in the current time that this Jigen, it was actually Lupin the entire time in disguise, having been the storyteller for it all, and him having spent the entire story screwing with her. Whether the story he told was true or not, or half-truths and half-exaggerations, that's going to have to be up to personal interpretation. But the reality is it was just to buy time for the quartet to actually raid the Federal Reserve, and making their way out of it as if they were die-hard with a vengeance. Zenigata, as always, hot on their trail. And as is my ultimate conclusion, this special is not bad at all. Like I was getting into with Yonemura, he at one point had the opportunity to be better than he's ultimately been, and even here with a story derivative of others, that is showcased. While it's not bad, however, this special is disjointed in that the story feels much like Kabuto eventually felt later on, where the story doesn't seem to be going anywhere with its events as the story isn't directly tying itself together between the fight over the Relic of Focus and the mystery of said focused MacGuffin. The connecting scenes aren't bad, but a lot of them are completely superfluous, there as if to fill the running time, and don't build off of each other into anything greater than the sum of its own parts. I still enjoyed it, but this does highlight the issues of Yonemura's works quite succinctly, in that it doesn't really make it feel like the important elements of the story really do matter all that much. With this though, I have finally closed a chapter of my reviewer career firmly behind me, and I am out of Lupin content I would want to review as a result. However, ladies and gentlemen, we're not quite done talking about Phantom Thieves of the Night, so I ask you all to prepare yourselves, as there's been something you've been expecting me to discuss all the way since 2017. And in this case, when it arrives, you will see it coming.